Hi everyone, and welcome to the Thursday session of week 6 of the 3P seminars that's brought to you by a collaboration between the Cure Parkinson's Trust, the World Parkinson's Coalition, and the Van Andel Institute. Today we have our special career advice theme session. So we have 3 panelists who will introduce themselves that are at varying stages of their career, and they'll talk about their career pathway and what different things they've faced during their career, as well as a bit about what they research in their labs. So we'll let them introduce themselves when we get to that point. But before that, I just wanted to bring your attention to the polling feature at the bottom of the screen. So if at some stage during this seminar, you could fill in this poll about the future of 3P seminars and give us a bit of feedback about how they've been going so far, we'd appreciate that. If you've previously completed the poll on Tuesday or have done the survey via SurveyMonkey, this isn't necessary. It's only if you haven't responded to this poll or survey yet. So on that note, I'm Michaela Johnson. I will be chairing this session with my fellow postdoc in Patrick Brandon's lab, Lisa Berquist. And I'll now pass it over to Michael Henderson, who is a new assistant professor starting at Van Andel Institute this August, hopefully. So over to you, Michael.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for the invitation to speak here today. I had a few slides I wanted to share just about my own journey and kind of some of the challenges and what I've done along the way, and some advice I got when I was going through the academic search process. So I'll just get started. So just as a brief outline, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey through academia, some data related to the academic job market, because we're all scientists and we like data, and then some of my own experiences related to job search. And I'll finish by sharing some of the resources I found very useful as I was searching for a job. So I have a timeline here of kind of my academic journey. This is a 20-year timeline, which when I was putting it out, it's a little sad, but also, you know, it's been a good 20 years. So I became interested in neuroscience in high school. I actually went to a tiny little high school about 30 minutes outside of Gainesville, where Malú is now, in Keystone Heights, Florida. And I was there, I really became interested in neuroscience. And so I kind of had the choice at that point to focus on biology or math, both of which I was interested in. And I chose biology, went to college at Florida State University. And from there, you know, I was very interested in research, did some research in undergrad, and decided to go on to pursue neuroscience in grad school at Yale University. And then I think we all kind of make these choices, and that's why I put this up as kind of a choice paradigm. Because at that point, I kind of had the opportunity to either continue pursuing academic science or to go into pharma, and I'm passionate about both academic science and also translating therapies. So I had the choice, and at that time I chose academia. And then for me, one of the bottlenecks I think we all know in the academic career path is the bottleneck to the assistant professor position. And so I had kind of had some vision of the best way to go about this. And of course, we all know if you can get some kind of bridge funding between the postdoc and the assistant professor, like a K-99, that can be incredibly useful. But there are other options available. And so I spent kind of the past year pursuing what all of these would look like. And the K-99 did not work out, but thankfully I was able to get other funding, which I think proved that I could be a viable tenure track faculty. And so I chose not to pursue these other options. But I just want to point out that it's not like this is a linear path. I think we all have to make choices along the way, and part of that is the choice we make because we have that option. Part of it is that things work out or don't work out certain ways. So that's my journey. And so I just wanted to kind of focus on a couple of things that I thought about a lot while I was pursuing a faculty position. One of which, and I actually, meeting with students, I got a lot of questions about, you know, how do you know if you're ready to apply for faculty positions, and what how do you predict your likelihood of success? So I want to point you all to this recently published survey of us postdocs that were on the job market in the 2018-2019 season. And so there were 274 postdocs from this survey. They actually just now announced they're surveying postdocs for the 2019-2020 season. So I think it'll be really an incredible data set that this group is collecting. And so you see that partially just on time, you know, it takes people different amounts of time, but you can see for life sciences to be in a postdoc 4 to 6 years, I think, is around the average, and you can certainly expect to spend some time there. This data I actually found incredibly interesting, the funding in Cell Nature Science papers. So we all kind of have heard some of these stories that for certain positions at least, you may be expected to have a Cell Nature Science publication, independent funding like the K99. And so it's definitely something I was worried about when I was going on the job market because I don't have a CNS. But you can see here, I found this encouraging that even if you don't have a CNS, which you can see the majority of people who are on the job market did not, and 70% of those that didn't even have funding still are getting offers. So I think the places you're applying will take hopefully a holistic approach to evaluating you, and you don't necessarily have to have a CNS or a K99 to land a position. The other thing they did in this paper is kind of after the job search was over, asked these applicants kind of what they thought was helpful for the application or hindered their application. And so I think, as you would imagine, funding, papers, networking, all people thought were productive for their application, and also were obstacles if you didn't have those things. The one thing I want to point out here is that poor mentorship, which I was a bit surprised by and a little sad about, because as a PI, hopefully one of your main goals is to give good mentorship to your trainees and help them on with their careers. So I would encourage you, if you don't have great mentorship from your primary mentor, to seek out other mentors. And also I found very helpful to talk to my peers too, who are going through the process at the same time, because they can give you a lot of advice about what they're seeing on their job searches. So then I wanted to try to open the black box a little bit for you if you're going through this process in terms of what an application year looks like. And I've just plotted out here some of my own data to give you an idea of what it looked like for me. And so in blue here, you can see the positions that I applied to and when I applied to them. And so you can see I started around the fall, winter. This went up over time and kind of plateaued in the winter. And one of the things that was a little hard for me is this kind of gap between when you apply and then the several months between your rejection or your when you can get interviews. And so this was a hard time for me because you're kind of waiting there and hoping that someone wants to hire you. And then so my advice for this process is to begin early, but don't be discouraged if you haven't heard back for several months. And the advice too, obviously, is to not have a COVID-19 related shutdown in the middle of your application process, which of course you can't control, but this is what happened, and I'm sure you've all heard the stories of places hiring freezes, or even perhaps rescinding offers. I'm hoping this doesn't impact academia too far moving forward, but I guess we won't know for a while. The second thing I wanted to point out is something I thought about a lot as to how many places you should apply. And initially I had thought, I would apply maybe 10 places because those were the places I can envision myself working. And I want to encourage you to apply more places as I was encouraged to do by talking to colleagues and partially through that review. That for several reasons. One is that just in terms of numbers, the more places you apply, the more likely you are to get an offer. And you would say, yeah, well, maybe but what I won't want to apply somewhere I don't want to go. And I would say that you may be surprised too, the places that you think you may not have been interested in could be actually a really great fit for your academic career. And then finally, the interview process is actually an excellent way to see what others are working on, practice defending your science, and mature as a scientist. And so in terms of the places I applied, I kind of broke this down into two categories, one that had kind of broad job announcements and one that had neurodegeneration related ones. And I want to say to all of you that are pursuing neurodegeneration research that first of all, there were 20 places that I applied that specifically mentioned neurodegeneration. So this is a hot field right now, I think, and people are looking for people doing neurodegeneration research. So I think that's encouraging. Second is that you can see 90% of the places that I got an interview were all specifically looking for neurodegeneration researchers. So, so this is, I think, you're likely to get interviews at places that are really looking for you specifically. So finally, I wanted to point out some resources that I found very helpful. I can obviously share these afterwards. This is the survey of postdocs that I had pointed out. I think they'll come out with another one probably in the spring and or in the summer. This is a book that I had read. I think it was recommended, and it's really great. Kind of overview of what it's like to lead a laboratory, and you know, some of the obstacles or things you should think about when planning them. And then these are 4 other publications that answer a lot of questions you may have about the job search. And I want to finish by just saying that the end is actually the beginning. So when you end your job search, it's actually the beginning of you starting a new job. So my recommendation would be don't exhaust yourself in the search, don't burn out, because you're about to start a whole new lab. And please do contact me if you're interested afterwards and have more questions, or if you're interested or know someone who's interested in joining a new neurodegeneration lab. And I'll end with that.
Thank you so much. I think that's a very valuable talk to a lot of people who are approaching that position in their career, or who are starting to think about their career trajectory and what they want to do. So we're going to move to our next speaker, but I also want to remind all of our listeners that we have this Q&A box, and we're going to have a combined Q&A for all of our speakers here today. So please start submitting those questions and we'll get to them later in the session. And now I'd like to introduce Laura Volpicelli-Daley, who's an assistant professor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. I have to say my career path was not as traditional as Dr. Henderson's, and I did not have a presentation. I'm sorry, I'm going to talk from the top of my head, which gets me in trouble sometimes, I'll admit. So hopefully I won't do that today. But you know, I wish I could say in high school that I was interested in neuroscience and, you know, really interested in research. I was on dance team in high school, and I bussed tables in an Italian restaurant. I was not as focused as many of my colleagues are. I went to college. I went to Franklin and Marshall College, which is a small school in Pennsylvania. I majored in math, mostly because I could put minimal effort into math and get A's. And then I also studied 19th century British literature, which I absolutely loved. I really miss my English classes. I could never get better than B's in those classes. One of my professors told me that my writing was very dry and boring, which works well as a scientist, but not if you're going to become an English literature professor. After that, I got my PhD in neuroscience at Emory University. I worked with Dr. Alan Levy, who's he's the chair of neurology. I studied Alzheimer's disease and membrane trafficking related to Alzheimer's. I got married when I was at grad school. My husband's an MD PhD. So as I got my PhD, my husband had to finish his MD portion, and I was going to stick around in my grad school lab, but luckily my mentor, Dr. Levy, said that that wasn't a good route for me, and that I should learn something new. So he encouraged me. I went and worked in the lab of Dr. Rick Kahn in the Department of Biochemistry, and that was great advice that Alan gave me. I learned a ton in Rick's lab about very basic biochemistry. We studied RF-GTPases, which play roles in membrane traffic throughout the cell. I learned a lot about protein purification, yeast studies. It was a phenomenal experience. I also, in Rick Kahn, I gained a valuable mentor. He's still my mentor today, and I still call him, you know, for advice and help to this day. it was always my dream since I was a first year in neuroscience student. I dreamed of doing a postdoc in the lab of Pietro de Camilli. He was one of my my science heroes. So after my husband got his MD, we went to Yale. He did his residency in neurology, and I was a postdoc in Pietro de Camilli's lab in the cell biology department there. I learned a lot about cell biology. It was a phenomenal experience, particularly cell biology of the neuron. You know, Pietro de Camilli is a world-renowned neuroscientist and cell biologist. I had my son while I was there. Well, I had my son right before I moved. You know, people want to ask me about things I maybe could have done differently. I think having a baby right before you start your postdoc, you know, you can't really time these things perfectly. I have to say I had a rough time during my postdoc with a new baby. I was raised to be a career woman. I was not raised to be a mother. I had no idea what I was doing. And that at that time, I have to say I did many different other career options. Yeah, I think working at a foundation, I had considered that, which I thought would be a great job because you can kind of coordinate between scientists and also donors. You know, I considered that as a career. I considered industry. I considered working at Williams-Sonoma, but all my friends and colleagues told me I'd be horrible at customer service because you can't tell customers that you think they're full of crap. So they said I'd be terrible at retail. But I always remember, you know, how passionate I was about neuroscience and how much I loved it in grad school and how much I dreamed of being a professor one day and having my own students and mentees. And I always wanted to be like Alan Levy because he was just such a fantastic mentor for me. So I stuck with it. My husband finished his neurology residency, and then we went to the University of Pennsylvania. My husband had to complete a sleep fellowship. He does sleep disorders. And so I worked in the lab of Virginia Lee. I did not overlap with Mike while we were there, but I worked in Virginia Lee's lab. That's where I learned a ton about Parkinson's disease, frontotemporal dementia, Alzheimer's. Virginia Lee, again, was another one of my heroes when I was a neuroscience student. I always talked about her. And, you know, just to have the opportunity to work for her and Pietro de Camilli was phenomenal. And then my husband, you know, started to look for jobs. And there was a job opening at UAB. And I remembered how much I loved Emory and what a great environment that was. A lot of new faculty that were really excited about their work. And I thought maybe UAB would be very similar. So we went to Birmingham, we interviewed. I love Birmingham. It's really a great city, a lot of shopping, a lot of great restaurants. I was really impressed by UAB. So I took on an instructor position at UAB. And then from there, I started to get some more funding, published papers, and I talked to my boss and told him that I'd really like to you know, go for an assistant professor position, tenure track. And he said, you know, my boss, Dr. Standard, said that he was impressed with me and impressed with my work. And so he agreed to promote me. And I applied for an R01 grant and I got that. Now I'm up for tenure. I have my own students. I have a lot of undergrads in my lab that I absolutely love. I love seeing them do well and being part of their career path. I have grad students, a postdoc. I love mentoring. I really love to help my students out. So I'm glad I stuck with it. You know, even though I felt like quitting at times, I'm really glad that I persevered and I stuck with it. And now I have kind of my dream job. So if I could give one bit of advice is to have, you know, good mentors, people that support you and kind of help push you in the right direction. I call Malú all the time and she gives me career advice. And it's really helpful to have a mentor that's not at the same university because she can give me advice that, you know, maybe someone like my boss might not necessarily give me the same advice. So it's really, I think it's really good to have mentors like Malú and Rick Kahn and people that you can call for support and advice what to do with your career. So, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So. That's it.
Thank you, Laura. It was great to hear about a non-traditional trajectory for all of us out there that might end up experiencing that. So thanks for sharing. Our next speaker is Malú Tansey, who is a professor in the Department of Neuroscience and Center Director for Translation Research in Neurodegenerative Disease at the University of Florida.
Great, thanks for having me. It's always fun to see my mentees and good colleagues and friends like Laura. She mentors up all the time, so don't let her think that this is a one-way relationship. So I'll tell you a little bit about, as Laura was speaking and as Michael was giving his presentation, I was thinking that the traditional is maybe the non-traditional, right? And my path was similar to Laura's, you'll hear in a second. I grew up on the border in El Paso, and I went to an all-girls school, and pretty much all my life, all-girls school. And then my first co-ed experience was Stanford, so college. And I studied biology and marine biology. And it was great. It was fantastic to see people from all over the world, and decided, you know, you need to have a diverse workforce and research force to really solve the problems of the world. And I think that the same is true today. So after Stanford, I met my then husband. We got married right after college, and he had applied to medical school in the UC system, which was super competitive, and did not get in. I'm sure that this is a story, you know, everybody knows the story. And so then after 5 years and a master's at Stanford, we decided we'd try again, and I tried, and I applied in Texas. And Texas has, at the time, had 6 med schools, and we all applied to all of them. And I got into 5 and he got into 1, and there was no overlap. So I decided, you know what, this is your second time around. Let's just go to Texas and go to UT Southwestern, which is where he got in, and I'll just work for a year and I'll reapply. Well, that changed the, you know, career trajectory that I had, because I fell in love with research. And although I loved science in high school and in college, I thought I was pre-med. But I'm very glad that that did not pan out. I decided, you know, research was my passion, and I wanted to follow that. So I got into UT Southwestern Graduate School. He was also an MD PhD. And so when I finished my PhD in 92, I had to wait around for him. And so I did 2 one-year postdocs in different labs to pick up different skill sets, and that was great. And I had my first child then. And then we moved, because he matched in his residency, matched to WashU. So we went to St. Louis. My daughter was born there, and I basically applied to a fantastic lab of John Murley and Josh Sains at WashU, and was ready to go do, you know, synaptic gene expression at the neuromuscular junction. And life throws curveballs at you. John Murley passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack at age 49, about 7 months into my postdoc. And it was a real devastating loss to the department, to science, certainly to all of his scientific family. And then I basically managed to, with the help of other people around, managed to publish something from that 1 year that I had been there. And then I moved on to a 4th postdoc. So 4 postdocs. Nobody's counting. My advice to you is always just have something to show for wherever you go, right? And so that was my final postdoc, where I did a lot of neurodegeneration and got to know Parkinson's. In fact, we were looking for family members of the GDNF family. So we, and by we I mean others in the lab, Paul Kotzbauer, who was also at Penn in Virginia's lab, discovered nurturin. And it was a really exciting time. And I was involved in the signaling pathway activated by nurturin and GDNF, and did a lot of signaling work. And at the end of that time, we were now going to a fellowship, right? So this non-traditional career trajectory, I think, is more traditional, especially for a lot of women or people who have partners that are tied to the 2-body problem, right? And so there's nothing wrong with it, as long as you're making choices that are going to be balanced by your family decision and you take turns. I think it's totally doable. So we went to LA, And I decided at that point, no more academia. I'm going to go work in biotech, make a lot of money, and work 9 to 5. And you know what? That's not always the case, because once a workaholic, always a workaholic. So it doesn't matter if the building is closed. After 5, you're still working and you're still thinking and you're still problem solving. So this work-life balance that you wanted us to talk about, I think is going to be an important topic. Work-life integration is important. You need self-care. You need to, balance it with other activities. That's really important, or you become less productive. And in biotech, I learned how to hire people, fire people, and I learned how to structure project reviews and how to have, go, no go decisions, and when you cut your losses, which is something that academics don't really learn, which is tough. And then I saw the best and the worst of biotech. One terrible company that I took a job at and should never have, but the red flag was that they didn't let you talk to the scientists very well. It was all administrative, right? So rule number 1, wherever you go, whatever job you're looking for, you got to talk to the people. If you're looking for a postdoc, you're looking for a job, you got to talk to the people. You got to talk to the people that are going to be your scientific family members. Otherwise, you're never going to know if it's a good environment for you. And so after that, I decided I missed mentoring. I missed the hypothesis-driven science. It was a great company for the second company that I was at. And that's where I learned about inflammation and role for immune function in neurodegeneration potentially. And I took those 2 interests and I started my lab at UT Southwestern. So the school that rejected me in med school then had me as a faculty member, which was, felt all too good. And it was a great time. I had a very supportive chair. An important thing when you're looking for jobs is that you have to make sure that they are going to be supportive. They're going to provide the resources that you need at that time in your career. And so that worked out really well. And from there, you become sometimes a little big for the place you're at, in terms of like everybody, now treats you like you're the expert, challenges you. And I felt that my trainees and I needed some other challenge for people that were better at the things we were doing at the time. And I had an amazing offer from Emory University, from Alan Levy, in fact, and my husband was also recruited to take care of spinal cord injured people at the Shepherd Center in Atlanta. So we moved, and it was one of the best things I did. We moved right after the downturn, right before the downturn in 2009. And it was a great time. I was there for 10 years, lots of support. And then again, same deal. I felt like our career, our trajectory would be better served by different resources and better resources than the institution was willing to provide at the time. And so I moved again. I moved to the University of Florida. We've been here for about a year. It'll be a year this August. And it's been a wonderful journey. In every place we've been, we have, fond memories. I still have a lot of collaborators. Never burn bridges. That's never good. But I think what you have to do is you have to figure out, while you want to plot your career trajectory, life throws curveballs at you. And what you plan now may not be, what happens, right? Nobody expected COVID-19. I think people are a little bit concerned that there's not going to be jobs, not going to be careers to really follow. I don't think that's right. I think there's going to always be a need for talent. There's always going to be a need for research. Otherwise, we'll never come up with good therapies. There's going to be a need for people to work in science writing and in policy more than ever, in public health. So even if you don't think that you're going to be doing research, either in a lab or in a company, there's many other avenues that you could pursue with your PhD after you become a postdoc and sharpen your skills that you can use. So never lose sight of that. I think one of the things that I always tell people who ask me, what would you tell people who are just starting out their careers, is I would say, follow your values, not your goals, right? So goals can be short-term or long. but the values are things that you have to think about, like, you know, honesty, integrity, you know, teamwork, things like that. That's been really important during the shutdown. So I will say that my scientific family has been amazing. I get moved because I know they've worked really hard to get us here, and it's been a challenge, but they totally rock. The other thing I want to say is, you know, it's important to get to know yourself and the people you're recruiting. If you can build a strong team and a strong family, nobody's perfect, but it's important to, you know, to play to people's strengths and to recognize your own limitations. Never sign on for anything you don't want to do. Just like when you write a grant, never propose anything you don't want to do, even if it sounds good on the application. And I think, you know, it's important to build networks more than ever. I think this shutdown has taught us that, you know, while you're physically distant, you cannot be either professionally or socially isolated, because that is not good for anybody. I think the best ideas for solving problems and getting research done is to reach out to people and to, you know, one of my mentors used to say, ideas are cheap, it's the execution that matters. So you have to really share your ideas. Don't worry about getting scooped. Gene Johnson, you know, used to say, if you don't share your ideas, people are going to think you have none. And that would be, you know, a kiss worse than death. So I think that's an important thing to think about. You will be able to have a perfect plan, and no matter how carefully you plan that trajectory, it may always have to be adjusted as you go. So stay flexible.
Thank you so much, Malú, for that. It was very inspirational and interesting to hear about your career path. So as many of you might know, we had the poll a couple of sessions ago where we asked the attendees what they were most interested in listening to our senior scientists talk about today. And what popped out the most was that people were very interested to hear about potential challenges that our speakers have had to face and overcome, and maybe what wisdom they have from facing those. So maybe I'll start up with you, Malú. Do you have anything specific you could share with us?
Challenges. Oh yeah. I mean, you know, Laura and I talked a little bit about this before this session. I think there is certainly, while there's a better balance of diversity in, you know, not just sex, or, you know, physical handicaps. There's a lot of effort to make the research in the scientific world more diverse. There's still a lot of implicit bias. There's still a lot of sexism. There's still a lot of different rules that women and men play by in academia, in you know, biotech, in every walk of life. And I think our trajectories probably reflect that. I have to say that, you know, as a Hispanic female, not in a traditional, you know, stay near, close to home, and, you know, do the get married and have a lot of things that really revolve not around your own career, but around your spouse's career. I kind of broke the mold a little early, so people weren't expecting me to, you know, to stick with the original rules. I think the sexism has been a challenge. I once pointed out to a colleague who was a male, that when you go to a meeting, and now it's different, right? Because we're all in Zoom. But when you go to a meeting, maybe you can still see it in Zoom. If you're sitting around the room, the men tend to just bust in many ways, and the women can sit there with their hand raised for a long time, unless you either bust in or somebody realizes that, hey, you know, not everybody's getting an equal opportunity to talk. These kinds of things are an impediment to everybody. not just women. So I think the sexism has been difficult. I think what we need is not just more women in positions of leadership, but we need a new generation of men like Michael who grow up in science knowing that there's a richness to everybody's having an opportunity. That's been a challenge, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to what you're saying, and it's kind of, it's not good that it is that way, but it's also nice to know that there are more senior people who experience those things that more younger scientists might also experience, and know that there's some kind of camaraderie in that, in a sense as well.
It's the elephant in the room, right? Nobody likes to talk about it. Having children, and this is not just for women. I know plenty of men who are single parents who are juggling it. I know, gay couples who are juggling it. I think it holds everybody back, but it's something that has to, the culture needs to change a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Laura, do you have anything when it comes to challenges that you would like to bring up or talk about?
I'd say, I'm going to echo what Malú said. I think, my challenges were having kids, I'll be totally honest. And I think, again, it's not just women, but men too. My dad was never at home. He was working constantly, never went to my ballet classes. That was what my mom did. But I think men today want to be part of their kids' lives and go to the soccer games and go to soccer practice. And I think now it's easier to be more flexible. A friend told me just have your phone with you all the time. So, I'll be at a soccer game and I'll get texts from my students and asking me questions. So I'm still available for them, even though I'm not in the lab. And I'm still available for them late at night as well. But I had challenges. I've had male faculty tell me because I leave every day at 5 to pick up my kids, I'll never be successful. But one of my friends, Alice Chen Plotkin, told me, when people say they're in lab till 8 o'clock at night or working 90 hours a week, they lie, and just forget about that. And I remember Pietro de Camilli telling me his most successful scientists were the ones that had lives. They were just more creative. And that doesn't say, we all work hard, but you just don't have to be that person that's necessarily have to be the person that's always there all the time. And I can still, I feel like I'm rambling, sorry. But yeah, for me, the hardest part was adjusting to having to pick my kids up from school and wanting to be at their activities and having to juggle that. Yeah,
probably a learning curve to figure out how to incorporate everything and still feel like you're enough in all areas, which not having kids, it's still difficult to know where to put your time. And I can't even imagine how more difficult it becomes as you add components to your lives.
And there was a time where, if I were going to give myself a grade, I'd probably give myself a B as a mom and a B as a scientist, or even a C. But now that they're getting a little bit older, it's getting easier. And I feel like I am able to kind of, ramp things back up. And I'm glad I stuck with it, even though it was challenging. So
there's light at the end of the tunnel for people who might be in your position that position right now. Thank you so much, Laura. So Michael, you are a bit earlier in your career trajectory, but do you have anything you have experienced when it comes to your postdoc or moving on to a faculty position, either more professional, specific professionally, or something where your personal life also was part of the situation?
Yeah, sure. So, so for my overview of my career trajectory, obviously today I mostly focused on, my professional career, but, so I have 2 children. I had one in grad school and I had one as a postdoc. And, I would echo a little bit of what Laura said, that, I don't really, obviously I can't spend as much time in the lab, but I think I spend much more efficient time in the lab. And in some ways, I think having children is a bit good for having people that work with me, because I have much more patience and I don't yell at people. I try to keep an even keel, and, But certainly, I think that's part of my life, and part of the reason I have chosen where I went for grad school. I was married before grad school, and we kind of chose that position together. I'm very lucky that I don't have a two-body problem. So my wife is a kindergarten teacher, and so she has been very supportive, and she, she's found good jobs, different places that we've gone, but certainly, my family is very important to me, and considering them as part of where I go. One of the challenges I would say, that's the thing that's been most challenging for me, is kind of to adapt to an academic culture. So my family is not academic at all. So my dad is a security guard, and my mom is an acupuncturist, and they're very supportive of my career, but it's kind of been a steep learning curve. And so I guess the way I can relay that is, so when I was younger, I was a mathlete, so I really enjoyed math, and my math coach was also the basketball coach for the team, and so he recruited me because I was tall and I was terrible at basketball. But so I got, it's kind of funny, I got most improved player 3 years in a row, and that sounds pretty silly because you shouldn't have to be most improved more than once. But it's for 3 different teams. And so I kind of see my academic journey that way too. So when I went from a tiny little high school to undergrad, that was a, big challenge for me to kind of understand what it means to live in that situation away from home, and to what academic science means, because I had no idea. And so my hope is that I can, be most improved player for undergrad, then grad school, and postdoc, and maybe now, hopefully as a faculty, I've at least learned what I need to, but that's certainly been challenging. And what I found most useful is kind of my peers, and many of them, I think if you're not in academia, maybe you don't understand, but a lot of people come from non-academic backgrounds, and kind of deal with the challenges of, well, maybe it would be better just go back and do construction like I used to do, and have the 9 to 5, like, is maybe appealing for industry. But I think certainly you can structure your lab or your life the way that's best for you, even if it's not the typical working 18-hour days, 7 days a week.
Definitely. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Okay, I'll now go over to some of the Q&A questions that we've been getting from our attendees. So we've had a couple of people ask our 3 panelists what their opinion is on staying within the same lab, either for a master's continuing on as a PhD, or for a PhD staying in the lab to be a postdoc, with some of them getting conflicting advice on whether they should stay in that same lab to kind of keep their progress going, or whether they should be moving to a new lab to gain new methods and network. So whoever would like to take that question on first, go for it.
I can tackle it shortly, and then I think I should punt to others. So if you're geographically constrained and you need to be in the same city, it's always good to move around within the same institution. I think Laura's done that, and I did that as well for my 2 postdocs before moving to WashU. You always hear, you must move cities, you must move institutions. I don't think that is true. I think that has become a difficult and disruptive thing for families and for science. If you can, and there are many places that have multiple institutions, and you feel like you need to be, in that position because of family, it should be doable. You should not have to, move cross country. If the opportunity is good for both of you, or the circumstances in life that you're in, then of course you should not let that hold you back. I do think that moving around, the nomadic culture that we have for you must go here, you must go there, can be very difficult and disruptive. But I think that you need to try to expand your horizons and not stay within your comfort zone by not staying necessarily in the same lab. You can always continue the work that you are wrapping up by, making sure you write that paper, and your new boss should be very supportive of that because it will make you more competitive for whatever career trajectory they're training you in, right? So when my students come in to a postdoc, I know they're still writing papers, and that's great because I think it's good for them. It's good for science. You should have a little bit of, maybe a year or so overlap in terms of, oh, I'm still getting that manuscript out the door or whatever. But you got to balance that.
I agree exactly with Malú. If you need to wrap a couple papers up and you need to spend 3 months in your grad school lab, that's one thing, but it's good to go. I've learned something new in every single lab that I've been in. And it just helps to break you out of your box. At Emory, we're very focused on the basal ganglia. At Penn, we're focused on synuclein. Everybody has different ways of just doing a Western blot. So I think it's good to get new perspectives and move on. One thing I will say, sometimes you can't move. You have family in the area and they're helpful, or for your spouse's career. I will say, my uncle was a professor. It was known that he would not move, and I think he was taken advantage of a little bit because of that. So, if you can't move, maybe don't advertise it. I would just say. I don't know if Malú maybe would disagree with me on that, but I have seen people being taken advantage of because it's known that they're not going to take off.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think consider the source of who's giving you the advice, right? It may be self-serving in some cases, and if you did a great job, there's lots of reasons why your PI wants to keep you. But that may not be in your best interest. It may not be in their own best interest either. It's important that you make the decision that's right for you and your life circumstance at the time.
Thank you. We got a question from Rebecca to Mike. What was the other industries positions you were considering that made you not want to pursue them? In particular, why not the pharma industry and taking the academic career path instead?
Yeah, I think a lot of people probably consider pharma. I actually considered it very deeply, and some of the things that I considered maybe, kind of specific to me, but one of the main things actually that had made me decide to stay in academia is that, as much as academics move around, I think if you're in pharma, you can be changing positions quite a bit. And I have friends that are doing that or have done that. And so essentially the advice that I was given is that if you go in industry, you should probably, move to San Francisco or Boston, because if you lose your position or, you decide to leave, you will have other places to go. And so, partially for family reasons and not having to move my family around so much any more than I have to, I think that was actually a surprisingly big part of my decision. But I think it'll depend on what you want to do. I think it certainly could be appealing and you could really have a big impact, which is what one of the reasons I had liked that position, possibility. But
thank you. And kind of tagging on to that, we got a question from Nakul asking Malú if it was difficult to move from the industry back into academia. And we also, I think, had a question if you had funding when you went back to academia from the industry already sorted out.
Right. So was it easy or was it hard? So, we had been working for a year on a project that is now finally moving into clinical trials in Alzheimer's disease, which is kind of amazing that it takes that long. That was 20 years ago. It was not hard because it was an incredible project that people put together. It took a huge team. There were 3 of us that were first authors on a science paper that definitely helped, like, what have you been doing for the past year? It's like, oh, I've got this. That did not hurt. And that was, like I said, not my doing. It was a whole team of people. And I finished the animal experiments as I got to my lab in UT Southwestern. Before we unpacked our boxes, we were doing the animal experiments that went into that paper. And so it was easier to move back into academia because you had something that you could say, this is what I've been doing. But it was hard because I wasn't doing neurotrophic factors and dopaminergic signaling anymore. I had decided, now you're going to do inflammation. And I knew very little about inflammation. And to break into a new area is very challenging, right? So you technically do that with a lot of, risk. Did I have funding? No. And in fact, I was worried about that. And I contacted my future chair and I said, should I be like applying for fellowships or like, what should I be doing? Like a grant or whatever? He goes, no. That will hurt the recruitment packet that I can get from the dean. So don't do anything. I was like, okay. I think at the time now, times have definitely changed. You're being recruited for your brain. You're being recruited to a mall, right? It's a department. For the traffic that you will bring in to that mall, right, with your small shop, and they're investing in you, your ideas, and your trajectory and what you've done up to that point. They know there's risk. They know they are going to have to invest your startup, and then if you do well, they're going to have to reinvest in you. And that's a real important topic that not many people talk about, and that's retention, right? What is the point of investing so much in a junior faculty if you're not going to reinvest in them at mid-stage? That's why people leave, right? That's part of the reason a lot of people leave mid-stage. And that is part of the reason people leave at mid-stage to go be a full professor. So I think that you must continue to reinvest in your people, and you have to make sure that you are in an environment where your colleagues are challenging you to question your own, ideas and challenge you so that you aren't just hook, line, and sinker believing everything that it comes out of your mouth, right? And so that's what keeps you fresh. And then the people that recruit you, and congratulations, Michael, you have a great boss in Patrick. I'm sure that he was very excited to get you. And I visited Van Andel, and it's a fantastic operation. So it's important that they have your back, right? That no matter where you are, company, university, small college, they are going to be very important people. So there's a lot of things you can't control in life, but you can pick your bosses by taking that job, right? You can pick your postdoc mentor by taking that job. So make good choices.
Yeah, definitely some good advice there. So we'll move on to another topic that had a high interest rate based on our poll, as how you've handled difficult situations. So we had a pre-submitted anonymous question about what if you have any advice on going into a meeting with your supervisor and you may not agree on the direction of the project or something, and your supervisor comes across as very condescending to you, and that really makes you feel less confident going out of that meeting and less motivated to then go and get that work done. So how can you handle that in a productive way to try and mitigate that situation? Any advice?
We'll let Michael go.
Okay. I think it will depend a lot on your mentor, and if they really are on you all the time, or whether this is kind of a one-off and they weren't feeling really solid about that data. And I think labs, I've been in different types of labs, and some will give you quite straightforward and perhaps sometimes seeming condescending advice, or seem condescending about your projects. And what I've done in those circumstances, like I said, it could depend on your PI, is kind of to take that opportunity to really prove your point, because people, when you give a talk or in other places, will seem condescending about your data too. And so it's good in some ways to be able to defend your data, defend your ideas or your project. But obviously, hopefully you have a rational mentor, and when you defend it, they'll you know, respect your opinion. So, and sometimes you can have different opinions, and maybe they're like, okay, well, you try it. I don't think it's going to work, and you try it, and if it succeeds, then you have something to show, and you kind of, you know, hopefully it can change their mind. But
Thank
I've
you.
experienced that myself.
Sorry.
You know, I mean, first, I think for me, so I'm a little bit feisty. I do fight back, and that's not always the way to go, I'll be honest. You know, things I've learned is, one, going in, you know, either having your PowerPoint with you or journal articles or something written out so that you can prove your point, I think helps. I think, you know, I've learned how to try to take deep breaths and remain calm, because certain people fighting back just is never going to work. I have had situations where I was told I was out of my mind, it will never work, and I just go and do the experiment anyway, and it did work. And then, you know, they're happy with me. I will say, if they continue to be condescending, I agree with you, it can beat you down after a while and you don't feel motivated. I would consider leaving if you can at that point. You know, I think having a good mentor that is going to be supportive of you and your ideas, you know, everybody has their bad days. I have a bad day as a mentor, but if it's a constant thing, you don't want to be broken down like that, and I would leave. Or look ahead of time, make sure you talk to the people when you interview, and you know, they may not be nobody will be 100% honest when you interview, but read between the lines what they're trying to tell you. You know, make sure you look to see, what are people doing after their postdoc? Are they going on to get jobs? Most of the people going on to get jobs, and I'm not just talking like a couple people going on. You know, I'm talking, do they have 20 people that went on to go get academic jobs? You know, what's the ratio of postdocs to people with, you know, that went on to do what they wanted to do? So do your research ahead of time, but if someone's going to be condescending or abusive to you, I would not, there's no point in staying.
That's a very good answer.
Real quick to that, two books you guys should consider. One is called Crucial Conversations, and I know I talked to Laura about this last year. Crucial Conversations is key, and it helps you and teaches you tools to have conversations with anybody. It is actually written from the standpoint of a spouse, but it's so true in the working place and in just getting, you know, to talk to people and your trainees, and it's really important. We've used it in conflict resolution at Emory, and it was very effective. The other book I'm going to recommend is called The Confidence Gap, and it talks about how do you handle these difficult interactions, and how do you develop the confidence to you know, as Laura says, talk back, but in a way that is, you know, very much unemotional, or at least you try to keep it, you know, professional. And those two things, I think, have made a big difference in certainly my life, and I use the tools all the time. So,
thank you. We just have one quick question I would like to get anybody's response for. We had one asking how to deal with a supervisor who's intentionally sabotaging your prospects by bad recommendations. Could anybody pitch in just super quickly before we need to wrap this up?
Very quickly, I will say that having sat on tenure committees and other committees, you need to know who's writing your letters and what they're saying. You will not be able to know without a doubt, because you have to waive that confidence, you know, seeing them. You need to pick them very, very carefully and know that, that they're going to be honest and not sabotage you. Now, if you know that you are not going to get a letter from someone, you should not ask for a letter from someone. That's going to hurt you. If they're deliberately sabotaging you, then you might need to have a crucial conversation and you know, figure out what the agenda is. But it's a difficult, challenging one.
I had a friend who had that situation, that she was being sabotaged, and I wrote a letter for her. I had other colleagues that were hiring, and I wrote an email and letters for her, saying what a phenomenal person she is and what a great scientist she is, and not to believe her current boss, so that she was able to get hired. So, I mean, you can also look out for other people that know you and are willing to support you and help you out.
Thank you so much. We're unfortunately running out of time here, and thank you so much for that advice. I think it's really good in this forum to say that we should support each other.
in this, no matter what stage in your career that you're at. So we got a lot of questions here, and I think we could have continued for another hour. Unfortunately, the time is up now, and I would like to again thank our speakers for taking time and sharing their stories. I think it's been very helpful for me, and I think it's been very helpful for a lot of people listening in today. And with that, I just want to say next week we're going to move into just doing 3Ps on Thursdays. And on Thursday, we're going to be joined by Rafaela So and Beverly. Beverly is an MSA patient, and Rafaela is going to have a scientific presentation in connection with MSA. So I think that's going to be a great session. So with all of that, thank you so much for joining us and asking all these questions.
Thank you. Email
Bye.
me.
Thank you.
Email me on Twitter. Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Reach out if you have more questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Sure.